The V actually stands for vertical. It's a vertical lookup, which means it looks from top to bottom in a vertical standpoint. So it's going to find what you ask it to look for in a column, then it's going to return the numbered column away from the first column that you asked for, okay? So let's walk through the actual syntax. So VLOOKUP, open parentheses, the lookup. What are we looking for? In this example, we're going to use the store number to identify our actual lookup. So we're going to give it a store number to look for. And in this example, we're just going to go with 1615. I'm sorry if this is hard to see. I'm just trying to change colors. All right. The array. When you actually start typing the formula, it's going to ask you for the lookup and in the array. What that means is the actual box of where can it find the information, okay? Now, the box is very important in terms of the array, all right? What it's asking for is the number of columns and the number of rows, which it can find all the information that you're asking it for. So in an array, a VLOOKUP looks from the far left column to however long off to the right as you ask it to do. So when you select your box, you want to make sure that you're capturing the far left column to where what you're looking for, the store number, is the farmost left column. If you start your box here, it doesn't have what you're looking for because it doesn't look to the left. It only looks to the right, okay? So make sure the identifier that you're using to look up where can it find it is the farmost left column, okay? And then you can go out as far as you want and stop it right here in terms of the array. So this array, when you look at it in Excel, will show from A2, which is this cell, column A, row 2, all the way to column C, row 6, okay? So in our example, we have A2 to C6. Now, in an array, best practice, whenever you do your array, make sure you lock down the array. In order to lock down the array, what I mean by that is to make sure that you put a $sign in front of the A, in front of the 2, and a $sign in front of the C, and a $sign in front of the 6. This locks down the array so that if you ever drag this formula anywhere, it will always look for the information you're asking for within this big red box, okay? If you don't lock it down and you start dragging this formula to look up other items, this is gonna move along with it. So make sure you put those $signs in front of it. And just remember tips and tricks on how we put those $signs in there. You can actually, as you type in the formula, once you have your array set up, just hit F4 and it'll put $signs on everything. If you hit F4 twice, it's going to put $signs in front of columns. And if you hit F4 3 times, it's going to put $signs in front of the columns. I'm sorry. 2 times is the rows, 3 times is the columns. Okay? And we'll get more into that once we get to the computer. Now, the column number. What Excel is asking for within the column number, it's not asking for A, B, C, or D. It's not asking for that because those are letters. It's asking for the number of columns within the box that you want it to find. So we told Excel we want store number 615. We told it where to find it, where 615 is the far left column. Now we need to tell Excel, whenever you find 615, give me the value of the cell that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many columns to the right of 615 there is, okay? So in this example, if I wanted January sales, I would start with, here's column 1, where my 615 is. January is column 2. So I would ask Excel to give me 2 columns. Okay? So what Excel is going to do now is going to go, okay, I found 615, and I'm going to go over 1, 2 columns, and it's going to return this value. Okay? That's what a VLOOKUP does. Now, this last part of VLOOKUP is the actual range. The range, what it means by range in this case is, do you want it to be approximately? Do you want me to find approximate to 615? Or do you want me to find 615 and nothing else? Which means in statistic talks, they may not look at stores, they may look at something else. They may look at like a range or a value, a dollar value or a statistical value, to where it doesn't have to be exact. They just want approximately, what is it, how close is it, right? You can use that in statistics. I have never used approximates. So in the range, it's going to ask you true or false. You always want to put the word false, because false equals exact, okay? I've never seen anybody else use true in this thing, because like I said, that's statistics. So always use the word false, so it can always find the exact thing you told it to look up. Now what's going to happen here is, if it cannot find 615, it's going to return NA. It's going to return an error. That tells you that this syntax, or 615, is not in the array, in the far left column, excuse me, of your array that it asked for. Okay? So let's walk through this example one more time. VLOOKUP, lookup. What do you want me to look up? Last class we talked about, instead of typing it in the cell, in the formula, we're actually going to use a reference cell. You can use this within a VLOOKUP as well, where in your reference cell, so you can actually, I'm sorry, if you're in a meeting and somebody wants to know the sales of your stores, but it's not like a formal report, it's come out like an ad hoc, right? And you have your financial model set up, and they say, oh, what's the sales for January in store 478? Well, you can use your reference cell and type 478 in your reference cell. But when you type your formula, your lookup is going to be cell E2, whatever that reference is, right? For this example, we're in cell E2, okay? So then Excel is going to say, okay, I'm going to look up whatever in cell E2. That's 478. So it's going to find 478. And then it's going to look within this array of A2 to C6 and say, all right, I can't go outside these boundaries. I have to stay within this boundary to give me the answer. Then it's going to say, how many columns over do you want me to return? In this example, 2, because we're looking for January. It's going to go 1, 2, and return 273. Okay? And false, because we wanted to give us exactly what's corresponding to store 478. Now, how can a VLOOKUP be useful in my everyday life? Say you don't use store numbers. Say you use invoice numbers, right? And on that invoice, there's a ton of information, okay? And that ton of information, you have invoice numbers here in your far left. You have the dollar amount of the invoice, the date the invoice was received, the date the invoice was paid, the description of the invoice. You have all that information. right? So how would that work for you? Well, if you wanted to know the description, and the description was 4 columns off to the right, and you put a 4 in there, and it'll give you that description, it will give you the text of what you need. A VLOOKUP not only will give you the text, but it will not only give you the value, but it will also bring back text. It will bring back anything that was in the cell that you told it to go and find. Okay, so that's the best way to use VLOOKUPs. And we'll get into some tips and tricks to determine how many this column number here as we get more into the computer. Because when you deal with larger data sets, sometimes it's pretty hard to count out how many columns you want doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll show you a little trick to get around that. All right, so let's go to the computer and we're going to use the same data set and walk through it. So excuse me, I'm going to show you my face up close and personal. I don't need a chair. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. All right. VLOOKUPs. So as we talked about, a VLOOKUP searches the first column of a range of data and then returns the contents from any column to the right on the matching row. Okay. So VLOOKUPs. You got your lookup value, your table array, your index number, and your range lookup, which is the true false we talked about. So in this example, we looked at store 615. And this is my reference box again. So we're just going to use the reference box from this point forward. So the formula, well, first off, let me tell you an easy way to get the actual row numbers to do it. If I know my array and I know what I'm going to look up is in this row, is in this column right here, okay? That means that the start of my array is the first column. So I can just put a number 1 right here. The tips and tricks part of it is that you just do 1 or that column plus 1 and just drag that formula over. So now I have all the column numbers of all my data. So it's easy for me to say, all right, if I want April, oh, that's 5 columns away. Or if I want June, that's 7 columns away. Okay? Another way to do this, when you're typing your formula, which is VLOOKUP, and we're going to use the reference box here, hit F4 one time to lock that cell down. And then they're going to highlight our table array, which is all of our data here. I want you guys to notice something. As I click and drag to capture my table array, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the box, you see those numbers change. It has a number R by a number C. Those are rows and columns. So if you know that you want April and you start clicking and dragging across, you'll see that April is 5C, which is 5 columns away from your box. So that's a quick way to identify it, and then you can highlight the rest of it. Oh, my screen is too small. Apologize. Everybody see now? Perfect. So I'm going to type this back up, VLOOKUP. My reference cell. And again, when I click and drag, look in that bottom right-hand corner, you'll see 4R, 4C right now. But if I want April, I need to go 1 more column, which will change that to 5C. So I'm 5 columns away. So now I know exactly what number to put in that box or to answer that Excel question. So I'm going to hit F4 one time, and that's going to lock down my array again. And then I said April. So April was 5 columns away from the left. And then false for my exact match. Now, it returned an NA because I didn't tell it a store number. So if I wanted store number 2109, it would give me 39 because it found store 2109, and then it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns away and gave me what was in that cell. Okay? So that's a VLOOKUP. We're gonna skip the exercise and go to HLOOKUP so that we can get through the rest of the other formulas. Okay? Now, HLOOKUP, let me turn the screen back on. And for the people in the room, if I'm moving too fast, you guys are my group to tell me I'm moving too fast, right? Because I'm sure probably blowing by some things there. All right. So HLOOKUP. The H in HLOOKUP stands for horizontal. Horizontal is left to right versus vertical, which was up and down. Okay? And before I move on to HLOOKUP, let's go back 1 second. A VLOOKUP, one of the things about a VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, index matches, you have to have a unique data set in terms of what you wanted to find. If there are multiple store 615s, it will only find the first one going from top to bottom, okay? If you have 615 2 cells down, it will ignore it. It will only pick up the first one, okay? So make sure that you have a unique data set when you're using VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, or index matches. Now, in the HLOOKUP, it will find the first thing it finds from the left to the right. So if I had multiple Januaries or multiple columns that have the same headings, it will only stop at it will only find the first one and then stop. Okay. So HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP is a horizontal lookup, which again, like I said, was left to right. And the great thing about an HLOOKUP and a VLOOKUP is the exact same syntax, but instead of looking at columns, it's going to ask you for the row number. Okay. So let's walk through an example with the HLOOKUP. So in the HLOOKUP, this time we're going to make it look for the actual month versus looking for the store number. Okay. So if we wanted to know the sales for February, we'll make sure our reference cell, whatever we type in our reference cell, matches the heading columns. Okay. Then the array, we're going to keep the same array from A2 to C6, which is our big red box right here. We're asking it to find February, so we need to make sure that February is in our topmost row. Just like on a VLOOKUP where it was our far left row, we need the topmost row, okay? So February is there. Then the row number. Now, just like a VLOOKUP, how we counted from left to right using our farmost left column of our array, an HLOOKUP counts from top to bottom, asking for a row. So if this is our topmost column, this is row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if we wanted to know store 478, we needed to know how many rows down from the top is 478. We can count it 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you, sir. And put a 4 here. And then exact. And what Excel is going to do, Excel says, all right, they want exact. They told me to go look in E2 to find what I need, which is February. It's going to go across this top row, find February, and then it's going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's going to return, 275. Okay? So just like a VLOOKUP, except it's going from top to bottom versus left to right. Right? Questions or anything?
Yeah, we did get a question. Aaron asked, how do you use H and V lookups across different work tabs?
Perfect. So the question was asked of how to use this formula across tabs within the same worksheet or within different workbooks. And the answer to that is wherever you're typing your formula, you can just make sure that the array is where the data is. So for example, if on, let's just call it tab 1 was my model, okay? That was my model sheet. That's where I'm going to do all my formulas. So I'm going to do all my lookups. And then tab 2 had my data. Okay. The way my formula would read is H lookup. Let's use the H lookup while we're here. I'm going to use our H lookup. And we're doing all the formulas on my model tab. Okay. We're doing it here. So it's going to be H lookup E2. And then the array is where all my data is. So it's going to look like whenever I hit my comma here and it asks me for my array, what I'm going to do is click over to tab 2 and then select my array box. Okay? And the way it's going to look here, it's actually going to say tab 2 exclamation point. Then right behind it will be the array that you just selected. So therefore, now it's not looking at the information on tab 1, it's actually going to find the data on tab 2 because that's where you told it where it was. And then the rest is the same from there. Okay? Same thing with H lookups, V lookups, sums, sum ifs. As long as you tell it to go where to go find the data, you can use them interchangeably. Okay? So with that, let's go back to the computer and we'll jump back on with the H lookups and we'll work through an exercise or two. Okay, H lookups. Thank you. All right, H lookups, again, uses the first row range of data and return the constants from any row below the data. And then we see the syntax there. So in our example, we want to look up store 2109 and find the sales dollars for April. So my store number I want is 2109, but that's not what I'm looking for in an H lookup, right? Because in an H lookup, we wanted to know what April was. So we need to find what's in the top column. So actually, this would be my month, and then we would type in April as my reference column. Because, for example, if I had individual tabs for every individual store that was on my list, like if I had a dashboard that said, this tab is only for store 2109, I already know where 2109 is in terms of what row of data it is. But for my formula, I want it to carry over for the month. So that's why I'm using an H lookup versus a V lookup, because I already know what the far left column of data already is. I already have that set. So my formula would be H lookup. The value is April. Lock that down with F4. The table array, again, we're going to use that little trick and we're going to highlight and drag. Okay. I'm looking for store 2109. So as I drag down and I stop at 2109, I see that it says 6R in my little box here, which is 6 rows down. Okay. So then I'm going to highlight the rest of it because I already know which row I'm on. Lock that down. And then I'm gonna put the row number of 6, because that's where 2109 is. And then type in false, because I want the exact thing to be returned. My answer is 39, because what happened was Excel said, oh, here's April, and then let me go down horizontally. That's not what that means, horizontal. Let me check to the right horizontally and find April, and then let me count down 6 rows, which is 39. Now, also, I want you guys to notice something. I'm holding my click and drag right now, and I want you guys to look. When I do it again, I want you guys to look right here in this box. This box is a GPS, basically. It tells you where you are on the spreadsheet, okay? But it also works as a selection device to show you what you have selected. So if I don't know what my array is, if I just grab this array, you notice there's no little box to the bottom right-hand corner anymore. But if I look in that top left-hand box, I have 7 rows and 7 columns selected. If I drag it some more, it kind of gets out of range, and then it brings up the little box to the right, where I have 27 rows selected and 18 columns selected. That's the array that I have selected. So I'm gonna do it one more time so you guys can see. If I start selecting data, the more I select, you see those numbers change in that top left. It works as a GPS. It works as where to find, to tell you what you have selected. And it also works as a thing where you can jump to a certain cell. So you ever use the page up, page down forever, trying to get down to 100 lines of data? If you just type A 673, it will go to cell A 200,673. Okay? So just a little tips and tricks incorporated now in what we're doing. All right. So exercise again. What were the sales dollars for store 2011 and 478 in the month of January through June? Now, if I'm going to put my formula right here, I'm still going to do my HLOOKUP. This time I'm trying to find cell 211, so I'm going to use the reference cell of just clicking on cell 211. But this time I'm going to hit F4 once, twice, 3 times, because I want to lock down the actual column that I'm in. Okay? Because when I drag this down, I want it to drag to 478, but I don't want it to drag from left to right. So that's why I lock down the column, but let the rows be free. That's why I don't put the $sign on that one. Now, the table array, same table array, we're going to start from here, select the cross, and I have B25 to H31. That selects everything I need. Hit F4, comma. I know that 211 is 5 rows down. We'll put 5, and then I'm going to type in false. Oh, I did something wrong. What I did wrong was in an HLOOKUP, I told it to go find 211. That's not what we want. The question was to find the month. So I wanted to find January in this case. And I'm going to hit F4 2 times to lock down the row. So when I drag this from left to right, it'll move from January to February to March to April to May. Okay? Now, 186. So if I go to 211 here, I see it's 186. If I was to click this formula, and there's a little square when I select the cell. If I click and drag this, it's dragging the formula over. See that? So now it's saying here's 211, but this time instead of looking for January, I'm looking for December. Notice how this changes when I go over. See, this is D39. Now it's at E39, F39, and G, because I didn't lock it down. Now, if I drag it down, I get the same number. The reason for that is because in this formula, I told it to go and return row 5. Store 478 is not row 5. Store 478 is 1, 2, 3, 4 rows down. So I need to put a 4 there instead. So now it gives me what I need, and I can click and drag it over. So now I've answered that question by writing one formula and editing another one to get what I need. Now, how is this useful? If I had 1,000 stores, I'd probably use a VLOOKUP instead, because it's for this. But if I had 1,000 rows of, well, not 1,000, but if I had a couple hundred rows of columns of data with different headings for an invoice, probably, right? The city, the state, the zip code, whatever. I can click and drag this formula over and pick up every piece of information off that invoice in that data set that's 300 rows and 300,000 rows and 300 columns long by just putting one formula in and dragging it across, right? So that's an H lookup, and that's VLOOKUPs. Any questions on this? Perfect. So we're going to get into index matches, and we're going to use the exact same data set. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the differences between the two. Okay? The differences between a H lookup or VLOOKUP, the advantages and disadvantages versus an index match. An index match is going to use a totally different set of syntax. An index match is truly a compound formula. It's not a singular formula. There's an index formula and there's a match formula, okay? The match we're going to use within this formula is just to answer one of the questions for the index, okay? So let me erase some of this and then we'll jump into it. And I'm going to leave the H lookup formula here so you can see the differences between the two. Okay? And excuse this, but I'm going to erase this box here. We won't need this anymore. All right. Now, advantages of VLOOKUP and H lookups. Advantage is you can find exactly what you need pretty quickly. Just a quick formula, you type it in, it'll give you what you need. Disadvantages, it only works from left to right or top to bottom. Disadvantage, if I was to get a data set and I needed to insert a row in my data, but I already had my formula set up because I did this process last month, right? So all I had to do was just drop my formula in there and I was fine. But this month you had to add this column plus this column, so you had to insert a column in order to figure it out. Well, if you told Excel to return 1, 2, 3 columns, you had a hard-coded 3 in your row number, right? Which is going to return your February. But for some reason, whatever the reason may be, you inserted a column. And now February is column D. It will not move with it, okay? Because Excel is very, very literal, where it's only going to return what you told it to return, which is 3 columns over. So in this example, if I inserted a column here, and now it's January, and in January, the column is going to love this, January adjusted, right? So now my data, I have January adjusted. What happens? 1, 2, Now this is my third. January adjusted is my third column, and February is my fourth. So it's going to return this instead of this. That's a disadvantage of a VLOOKUP. Same thing with a HLOOKUP if you had to insert a row. So you got to be very careful when you use VLOOKUPs that you have the same data set and you're not inserting rows in between. So how do you get around that, right? One of the advantages of an index match is that an index match will move with the formula. Okay? So, index equals index. Now, the first thing the index is going to ask you for is where can I find the answer you're looking for, okay? Which is also called the array. Actually, this one is lookup array, and this is array, okay? Now, index, where can I find the answer you want? Then, it's going to ask you for the row number and then the column number. Okay? What that means is, and this is, I don't want to go too far out of the box, but basically what this means is if you were to tell the index, I want you to return what you find in your array that's in row number 4. Excuse me, just a second. Yeah. So the array is saying, hey, go give me back, let's just call it February. That's 3 rows down and 2 columns down or whatever, right? So how do we accomplish that? Using the match formula. So, got a bunch of stuff written all over the place. All right, sorry about all the mess. So let's walk through it. So index, if I know I want February, in February, I'm sorry, if I want January, and January is in column B, okay? When I open my parentheses, I'm going to click and drag and select January. That's the values that I want to come back, okay? So my formula is going to look like index, and it's going to be A2 to A6, okay? So that's hard to read. Let me switch for markers here. Now, if I knew exactly what row I wanted in terms of the store number, 615, I would say, okay, well, that's 1, 2, 3 rows. But if I don't want to go count the rows, I don't want to count the rows. I'll use what is called a match formula. And what the match formula is going to do is I'm just going to embed a match formula in the middle of my index formula. And I'm going to go match. And then I'm going to say match, what am I looking for? 615. And I'm going to reference it to my reference cell in E2. 615. So I'm going to put E2 here. Okay? And then it's going to say, well, where can I find what you told me to find in E2? Now I'm going to use this new array. Same number of rows on this one, right? That's very important as well. When you do this, make sure that the rows match, same number of rows. So now it's going to look from A2 to A6. supposed to be a B. So now it's going to look from A2 to A6. Hopefully I'm not going too far. And then on the end of the match, you remember on the VLOOKUP, it said true and false, where Excel also recognizes true and false as 0 and 1. Okay, 0 being false, 1 being true. We're going to put a 0 here on the end of my match because we want the exact find of this. Okay, and then I'm going to put an extra parentheses because I don't care about the column piece right now. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to close my formula off to say, hey Excel, so everybody can see me. I'm going to say, hey Excel, go look between B2 and B6 and hold it right there. And when you get there, I'm going to tell you what I want out of this array. So pause. Then I want you to match what's in E2. What's in E2 is 615, so it finds 615. Okay? And then it's going to say, all right, when you use your match formula, it's going to say, all right, I found 615 3 rows down within this new array right here. 3 rows. Okay? So now what's happening? If I go back to the original index formula, I'm saying, hey, index, give me this array 3 rows down. So find what's in here, but give me what's 3 rows down. And you answered the question of what's 3 rows down, of how many rows down it is, by using a match formula. So now what just happened is, I don't have to count anymore. I don't have to count how many rows down for an HLOOKUP. Thank you. And I don't have to count how many columns over for a VLOOKUP because my match formula did it for me. So that's how you use an index match. That's how you use it from a VLOOKUP standpoint. Now, the advantages of using an index match versus a VLOOKUP is if I were to, number one, if I wanted to go this way, okay, for some reason I had, let's go back to the example of invoice numbers, right? If these were invoice numbers and I had Texas as a field in here, I had a state of Texas, right? Well, if I wanted to go find the invoice number because I don't know what the invoice number is for that one Texas invoice, I can use an index match to go find Texas. I can say, all right, Texas is 4 rows down. Give me what's to the left of the formula by just selecting the area you want to return. So therefore, I don't have to go left to right. I can go backwards. I can go forwards. I can go up. I can go down. I can go anywhere I want because I'm already telling it exactly what row to go find it or what column to find it. Okay? So that's one advantage of an index match. The next advantage of an index match is, remember on VLOOKUP, we talked about if we inserted a row for our good friend January adjustment, right? Well, if I told it to find February, when I insert, the formula will move with it. So I don't have to change my formula because when it inserts, Excel is smart enough to know that once I insert, I'm moving a certain cell, so I need to move with it. Okay? So those are the advantages and disadvantages of index matches and VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs. There's a lot more that goes into this. I encourage you guys, and I think we're going to cover this in another class, but remember how we crossed out the column? There's a formula that's called an index match, where not only, instead of selecting one row or column of data, you actually give it a box, okay? And you tell it, hey, go find my row that it's in, go find the column that it's in, and then give me what intersects, okay? Now, when you do something like this in a financial model, and I use this formula all the time, I could say, I don't know what row store 478 is in, and I don't know what month I need right away. But as long as I can connect to a reference cell, I can use it. I could type my reference cell in and say, all right, give me 478, give me February, and what the formula is going to do is find 478, and then it's going to find February and return the 275 without me ever having to count a row or a column. And I can use my reference cell of changing either dynamic I want to, and it'll give me everything that's within that box. So I know we only got 5 minutes left, and I know we're going to be real tight, so I incorporated some tips and tricks inside of the class. But I want to leave you with one more. The match formula can also be used within the VLOOKUP. Okay, so if you have your VLOOKUPs and your HLOOKUPs and you don't know how many rows there's little tricks that you can use to find that using VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs. And there's also one more. There's what you call a row formula and a column formula. I don't know if you guys have ever used that. I don't use it very often, but it's a very cool one. I like using it. And I'm going to show you it right now before we run out of time. But as we talked about GPSing something, if I have my data set and my data set is one column off to the right, if I type the row formula, okay, and then all I did was type the word row, open parentheses, close parentheses, it'll tell me what row that I'm in, okay? And I can do the same thing with column, just type in COL. Well, actually, you got to type the whole thing. Column, and it'll tell me I'm in the second column from the left, from the side. But if I have a column and I want to just use this formula going forward, because my data starts on the second column of the sheet, but for my VLOOKUP purposes, it's my first column of my array, I do column -1. Right? Easy enough. And then I just use my other one that goes, this one, oh, too much. I go this cell +1, and now I know exactly what column I can use my VLOOKUP for. You can use the same thing with rows and columns, right? Seems simple, right? So just want to remind you guys, no matter how much you think you know about Excel, there's always a better way to use it. And I find different and better ways to use it in my everyday work as well. So go find different and better ways to use Excel to help improve your life and efficiency. And you can get a lot more Candy Crush done. Promise. Right?
So before everybody goes, I just want to add to what Drew just said and encourage everybody. I've said it at the end of the other sessions, we learn by doing. And, you know, since I've started working with Drew on this, it's fascinating to watch him go through it. And, you know, one of the things I live by is you have to go slow to go fast. And it's really hard for me to slow down and go back through this stuff and try to actually apply it. But the more I do it, it's amazing. I'm like, I'm actually getting better at this stuff. So please go watch the recordings, look at the spreadsheets we're sending out, and just do it, you know, practice, and everybody will get better. So thanks everybody for joining. We'll follow up and send out the invite for the next one in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. Y'all have a good one.